I didn't blow out the candle. It just stayed lit, flickering in that tiny cupcake like it was mocking me. Everyone else had already clapped. Someone even said, "Make a wish," but I didn't move. I just sat there, staring at it, while the wax melted into the frosting and the room buzzed around me with voices that weren't mine. She wasn't even looking. She was across the rooftop patio, at the edge of the crowd, tilted just enough toward him that anyone paying attention would notice. I wasn't the only one paying attention. I think it was the tilt that ruined me. It wasn't just that she smiled at him. She smiles at strangers. It wasn't just the way she laughed. She always laughed too loud at parties. It was the way her entire body faced him. Like gravity itself had shifted. Like he was the axis now and I was orbiting somewhere on the edge, where the light doesn't quite reach. This wasn't some random night out. It was my birthday. She planned the whole thing. Rented the rooftop. Chose the theme. Told me, "You're going to love it." And I believed her. God, I actually believed her. I wore the stupid jacket she bought me. Still had the tag scratching the back of my neck. I rehearsed my fake laugh for her friends. I played bartender for the first hour while she mingled. But the moment he showed up, I was erased. Just like that. He wasn't handsome. Not in the traditional sense. But he had that presence. That lean-in close when he talks kind of energy. That knowing smile. And she folded into it like she'd done it before. The cupcake sat there with the candles still burning. No one noticed it. Or me. Not even when I stood up, left the table, and walked past the couple taking selfies near the heaters. Not even when I went downstairs and out into the alley behind the venue. That's when I pulled out my phone. She hadn't texted me once all day. Not a happy birthday, babe. Not a hey, hope you're enjoying the party. Just tagged photos and recycled captions on social media. It was all for show. So I sent her a message. 6 words. Hope he's worth the silence tonight. Then I turned off my phone. And I disappeared. That's when things got complicated. And it wasn't the candle that burned out first. It was everything else. I didn't go home that night. Not because I had somewhere else to be, and not out of spite. I just didn't want to hear the sound of that rooftop door slamming behind me. I didn't want to hear her heels clicking toward me like nothing happened. I didn't want her to hug me like I was a ghost she suddenly remembered. So I kept walking. Past the dumpsters. Past the parked cars. Past the bakery that was already closed. I didn't even know where I was going. All I knew was that I didn't want to return to a place where I had to compete for her eyes. I ended up in a late-night diner that smelled like burnt coffee and regret. Sat in a booth by the window with a view of absolutely nothing. The waitress asked if I was okay when she noticed I hadn't touched my fries. I told her it was my birthday, and she gave me a slice of pie on the house. It tasted like cardboard, but I said thank you anyway. My phone buzzed twice around 11:41 p.m. Her name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. The third call came at 12:02 a.m. Missed again. No voicemail. Then the texts started coming in. Where did you go? Everyone's asking about you. Are you seriously doing this tonight? Can you stop being dramatic and just come back? We can talk about it at home. There it was. Dramatic. That word again. She always used it when I tried to tell her how I felt. Like feelings were theater. Like my pain had stage lights and curtains. I stared at that last message for a while. We can talk about it at home. As if home was a place where talking had ever worked. As if we hadn't rehearsed that same empty script 100 times before. I tell her how lonely I feel. She gets defensive. I apologize for making things a big deal. And nothing changes. Except this time, something inside me refused. At 12:13 a.m., I sent her one sentence. You made me invisible on my own day. No emojis. No love you. Just truth. And truth has sharp edges when it's been dulled down for too long. She didn't reply. I stayed in that booth until the sky started turning the color of ash. That's when I knew I had to go back. Not to talk. Not to argue. But to face whatever came next. I wasn't expecting what I found. When I opened the door, the place was a mess. Cups on the counter. Balloons sagging. Her shoes in the hallway. But no sign of her. Not until I walked into the bedroom. There she was. Curled up on my side of the bed. Still in her dress. Phone in her hand. Eyes open. Red. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. But on the nightstand was something I never expected to see. A note. Not a text. Not a voicemail. A real, handwritten note. Folded once. With my name on it. And inside was something that would flip my world upside down. Far worse than anything that happened on that rooftop. The paper was torn from one of those notepads we keep by the fridge for grocery lists and forgotten errands. You know the kind, Magnetic strip on the back, lines already faded from spilled coffee and sticky fingers. But this wasn't a reminder to buy oat milk or pay the electric bill. No, this note had only 10 words, written in her rushed, jagged handwriting. I didn't mean for you to find out like this. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just a confession without a subject, like she'd run out of courage halfway through the sentence. I stood there for what felt like an hour, the paper shaking between my fingers while she pretended to be asleep, or maybe just wished she were. I didn't ask questions. Not yet. I just stared at her. The same woman who had looked through me all night like I was part of the furniture, now curled up in our bed like she had something to protect. Herself, maybe. Her secret. I felt sick. But the kind of sick that comes after you've already thrown up everything, emotionally empty. So I went to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, looked in the mirror, and tried to remember what I looked like before I knew I was being cheated on. Because let's be honest, that's what this was. I didn't have the details yet, but I had the outline. The silence, the body language, the note. You don't write something like that unless something has already happened. When I walked back into the bedroom, she was sitting up, rubbing her eyes like she'd just woken up. We both knew better. Her voice cracked like she was about to cry, but I'd seen her fake that too many times during arguments to fall for it. I was going to tell you, she said, not meeting my eyes. After the party. After your birthday. I didn't want to ruin it. I almost laughed. Ruin it? She acted like I was the one who had ruined it by vanishing, by not playing my role as the quiet, invisible husband in her curated little social scene. I didn't say anything. I just pointed at the note on the nightstand. She glanced at it, then looked away. It wasn't supposed to happen, she muttered. I asked the question I was scared to know the answer to, but couldn't stop myself from saying, "Is it Vaughn?" Her face twitched. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. That single second of silence told me more than any admission ever could. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I think that's what scared her most. I just sat down in the chair across from the bed, leaned forward, and said the quietest words I'd ever said in my life. How long? She flinched like I'd hit her. And then she started talking. Not because she wanted to, but because the weight of the lie had gotten too heavy to carry alone. What she told me next. It didn't just confirm everything I feared. It opened a door I didn't even know existed. And on the other side of it was a betrayal that went far deeper than some birthday flirtation. She started talking like the words had been building up behind her teeth for months, maybe longer. It wasn't even a proper confession at first. Just fragments. Sentences without endings. It was only supposed to be once. I didn't plan it. We were drinking. You were working late that week. And I just sat there, watching her mouth move, feeling like I was floating above the room. Detached. Like none of this could be real. Like any second I'd blink and wake up in a life where my wife didn't spend my birthday whispering to another man. But then she said it. A sentence I will never unhear. It started before Vaughn. Everything inside me froze. I had been so sure, so absolutely convinced, that he was the problem. The one guy she had let too close. The one guy she couldn't stop smiling at. But no, Vaughn wasn't the beginning. He was just the latest chapter in a story I never knew she was writing behind my back. I asked, "Who else?" And she said, "Does it matter?" That's when I lost it. Not by yelling. I didn't even raise my voice. I stood up, walked out of the bedroom, went straight to her home office, and opened the drawer she never let me touch. She used to say it was just old notebooks and receipts. That drawer was her little sacred corner of the house. I had respected that for years. I shouldn't have. Inside was exactly what I hoped I wouldn't find. A journal. Not a diary. No hearts or glitter or emotional poetry. It looked clinical, structured, pages with dates, names, places, initials next to the word met, or coffee, or hotel. The kind of entries you'd expect from someone planning meetings for work, not tracking infidelity. There were at least 4 different names before Vaughn. One I recognized, one I didn't, one I thought was a friend of her brother's, and one that absolutely broke me. It was my former boss. I flipped through that book like it was evidence from a crime scene, which, in a way, it was. Every line was a moment I had no idea had happened. Every entry was a day I thought we were fine. A time when she told me she was busy with errands, or helping her mom, or running late from yoga. And all of it was a lie. She must have followed me because suddenly she was behind me in the hallway, begging me to stop reading, telling me I was twisting everything. that it wasn't what it looks like. I turned and held up the journal like a trophy. Then explain this. She reached for it. I pulled it back. She said, "You don't understand what it was like being with you." And there it was. The moment she tried to flip it. To make me the reason she slept with other men. Like I had written the names. Like I had scheduled the meetings. But it didn't work. Not this time. That journal was no longer a secret. It was proof. And I suddenly understood something I hadn't seen clearly until right then. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't about boredom. This wasn't about Vaughn. This was who she chose to be. And I was done being the fool who clapped while she blew out the candle. But I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to storm out. I was going to burn it all down, with silence. And I knew exactly where to start. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't throw anything. I didn't even tell her to leave. Instead, I went cold. Ice cold. And when she asked what I was going to do, I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Nothing right now." That terrified her more than screaming ever could. She kept talking, rambling excuses, promises, lines she probably rehearsed in front of a mirror. I stopped listening after a while. I was already somewhere else in my head, planning things she'd never see coming. That journal stayed with me. I took pictures of every page and uploaded them to a hidden drive, labeled each file by date, documented everything. Because if she thought I was going to walk away quietly and let her keep her dignity, she didn't know me at all. For 2 weeks, I played the part of the understanding husband. I went to work, came home, nodded when she talked, even cooked dinner once or twice. She thought things were getting better. I let her believe that. I needed her to relax. I needed her guard down. Because I wasn't going to hit back emotionally. I was going to dismantle her from the inside out, piece by piece. My first move was Vaughn. I knew he worked in real estate, and it didn't take much digging to find out who he worked for. His firm had a policy, a pretty strict one, about employee conduct, especially when it involved clients' families. See, 2 of the other names in that journal? They weren't random hookups. They were connected to her event planning clients, and Vaughn was on a deal with one of them. I sent an anonymous email with screenshots. Just enough to raise flags, not burn the whole house down. But that was all it took. 3 days later, she came home crying. Vaughn had been let go suddenly, and she couldn't understand why he was blaming her. She said something about miscommunication and ruining his life. I stayed silent. Just watched her pace the living room, ranting, unraveling, clawing at a reality she didn't control anymore. Step 2 was my boss, my former boss. I hadn't worked at that company in over a year, but I still had friends there. One coffee chat. One, "You didn't hear this from me." And I found out he'd recently been nominated for a position on a local ethics board. Public-facing, political, all shiny reputation and clean image. And yet, here I was, holding evidence that he had been having an affair with a married woman who was also my wife, while I was under his leadership. You better believe that got forwarded, anonymously again, to the selection committee. Screenshots, journal scans, dates that lined up with company travel. Enough to make him radioactive. He didn't get the nomination. The press didn't pick up the story, but people talked. And when people talk in those circles, opportunities vanish quietly. She never figured out it was me. Not once. She thought the universe was punishing her. She started going to bed early. Stopped wearing makeup. She even whispered once that maybe it was bad karma. I almost laughed. But the final move, the one that would leave a scar she'd never cover, was still in motion. I was planning something she couldn't intercept, couldn't undo, couldn't twist into being my fault. She had spent years controlling the narrative. Now I was going to end the story. But not with fire. With absence. Because silence, when it's loaded with truth, echoes louder than any scream. The plan wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. No screaming, no suitcases tossed on the lawn, no smashed picture frames. That's not how I wanted to be remembered. I didn't want her to tell her friends I had a meltdown. I wanted her to wake up one morning and realize everything she thought would always be there was simply gone. I started preparing quietly. Every night, after she went to bed, I'd stay up on my laptop, organizing finances, consolidating accounts, redirecting payments to a new bank, scanning every important document I could find. I made a checklist: driver's license, passport, insurance, savings, the deed to my car, all transferred, duplicated, locked down. She never noticed. She was too busy trying to act like we were healing. In reality, She was sleepwalking through a war she'd already lost. I took a week off work under the excuse of stress leave, but I didn't stay home. I used that time to set everything in motion, rented a small furnished apartment 2 towns over under a different name. Prepaid. Quiet neighborhood. No connections to her. I even left my old email behind. I created a new one, signed out of everything else. Then came the hardest part, packing. I didn't take everything. That would have been too obvious. I left enough clothes to make it seem like I was still around. I left my toothbrush, my shoes by the door. But the essentials, the real parts of me, I took in one night, while she was out running an errand. By the time she got back, I was sitting at the table like nothing had changed. We had dinner. She talked about some movies she wanted to see. I nodded, smiled once or twice, but in my head I was already gone. That night, after she fell asleep, I wrote her a note. Not like hers. Mine was typed, printed, clean. Titled, "Since you like records, here's one you'll never forget." In it, I laid out everything. What I knew, what I'd uncovered, what I'd done. No threats, no insults, just facts. It was dated, signed, and clipped to a printed copy of every journal page she'd written. I placed it inside her wedding scrapbook. She hadn't opened it in years. Then I took one last look around. I didn't feel sad. I felt, still, like I had finally stepped outside of a lie I had been drowning in. And it was quiet. The next morning, she woke up alone. My keys were gone. My phone was wiped. My social media accounts deactivated. The house still smelled like me, but I was already miles away, sipping gas station coffee, watching the sun rise over a town she'd never think to look in. At first, I didn't hear anything. No messages. No calls. Just silence. But by the third day, she cracked. My old phone, the one I had forwarded to voicemail before discarding, lit up like a Christmas tree. She called, left messages, texts. She even emailed. "Where are you? Can we talk? You're being cruel. Is this some kind of punishment? Please come back. I'll do anything." Each one more desperate than the last. She thought I'd come crawling back, like always. But this time, I wasn't punishing her. This time, I was finished. She thought it was just about me leaving. Thought it was just another cold exit. Thought I needed time, space, whatever vague word she could use to make it seem temporary. That's how she explained it to her friends. I know because one of them messaged me, surprised, confused, maybe even a little proud of me. But I hadn't left to get her attention. I left to remove her from my life, completely. You see, while she was scrambling to call me, to email, to guilt me into responding, the second phase of my silence had already started. She just didn't know it yet. First came the bank account freeze. Joint account, closed. Every dollar I had transferred legally and cleanly weeks earlier to my own private account. I'd left a small amount behind, enough for her not to panic instantly. But when rent came out and bounced, that's when she realized something was wrong. Then the car. The lease was under my name. I canceled it. A flatbed towed it while she was at work. No warning, no apology. I watched it disappear from the street via the tracker I'd installed. She had driven that car to Vaughn's place more than once. She probably didn't think I knew. I knew everything. She tried to access the insurance. Blocked. She called the landlord. Found out the lease had always been in my name. Her name was never even listed. When the 30-day notice I filed kicked in, she got the letter, hand-delivered. She had until the end of the month to vacate. I'd already scheduled the cleaning service. I'd even left her enough for a deposit somewhere else. I wasn't cruel. Just done. Then came the real punch. I'd mailed a printed copy of her little cheating journal, the full one, front to back, to her mother. I know. You might think that's too far. But I did it because her mom believed in me. When we first got married, that woman held my hands and told me I was the best thing that ever happened to her daughter. That I was patient, kind, too forgiving. So I gave her the truth. No explanation. No commentary. Just the truth, in her daughter's handwriting. I didn't hear from her mother. Not a word. But I didn't need to. Because 1 week later, she stopped calling. 2 days after that, her number was disconnected. And then came the message. A single email from a new address. No subject line. Inside were just 5 words. I don't know who I am. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Not because it hurt. I was past the hurting. But because, for the first time in years, she was finally honest. She had built her identity around manipulation, attention, validation. And now that all of it was gone, the men, the fake stability, the narrative, She didn't recognize herself. And you know what? That wasn't my responsibility anymore. She broke something that could never be glued back together. And even if she sobbed until her voice cracked, even if she begged until her knees bled, there was no version of reality where I stepped back into that house or that life. But I wasn't done yet. Because the final thing I left her with was something she'd carry forever. The last thing I gave her wasn't revenge. Not spite. Not cruelty. I could have kept going. Exposed her to more people. Sent those journal entries to every contact in her phone. I could have posted it publicly, buried her under her own handwriting. But I didn't. Because that would have meant she still had a piece of me. And I was done giving her pieces. So I sent her one final email. One she'd never be able to unread. It started like this. You didn't just lose me. You lost the version of yourself who was loved unconditionally and still chose lies. I told her I forgave her. Not for her sake, for mine. I let go of every apology I'd never get. Every moment I stayed when I should have walked. Every dinner where I laughed alone. Every time I felt like a ghost in my own home. And I didn't send it to her new email address. I mailed it. Printed. Folded. Inside an envelope with no return name. Just an address she knew well, her childhood home. Attached to it was the one physical item I'd taken from the house, without her realizing. Our wedding photo. The one where she was laughing and I was just staring at her, completely unaware of what the future would hold. Across the back of it, I'd written only 7 words. He finally looked away, and never looked back. That was it. I never heard from her again. I moved forward. Slowly at first, like someone learning to walk again. I spent a lot of time alone, not because I was broken, but because I needed to remember who I was before her. I reconnected with friends I'd pushed away. I started hiking again. Got a dog. Laughed more, for real this time. With people who saw me. With people who heard me. And one day, out of nowhere, I met someone. Someone quiet. Soft-spoken. With kind eyes and zero interest in playing games. She didn't try to fix me. She just listened. She didn't ask about my past until I offered. And when I told her the story, the real story, she didn't flinch. She said, "I'm glad you walked away." That was the bravest part. Now, years later, I look back not with bitterness, but with clarity. Sometimes, the greatest act of self-love is walking away from someone who taught you to disappear. And sometimes, the best revenge is becoming someone they never thought you could be.